find such a love at our age. Whoever thought we could dance on?
Welcome to Couples Therapy in 7 Words. I'm your co-host, Judy Alexander, and I'm here with my husband, Dr. Bruce Chalmer.
Hello, Judy. Hello, viewers and listeners. Judy, what's today's title?
A Hopeless Romantic and the Masculine Ideal, an interview with Gregory Diehl.
We just finished that interview with Gregory Diehl. I hope you will find it interesting. He's quite an interesting guy. In Armenia, of all places. He's an American. I guess he said his grandmother, was Armenian. But he ended up in this retreat center he's created in Armenia, and you can check it out. And among the things he's written about is the Romantic Ideal. That's the title of his most recent book that we were talking about in the
Right,
in the
and
podcast.
talking about the differences between men and women and the different dynamics and how we need each other.
Absolutely, which I can certainly relate to.
Yes.
Indeed.
Yes, and talking about his soulmate or
Yes, I know.
soulmates. And
you nudged me when that came up,
yes,
didn't
I
you?
did.
Yes,
Because
you did.
yes, we have found our soulmates.
Indeed. So let's just briefly put in some plugs for our books.
Yes,
'cause
we do
like to
have
do
a
that in
few
this
books.
podcast.
So
Yeah.
we'd like to call this the book that started it all, Reigniting the Spark, Why Stable Relationships Lose Intimacy and How to Get It Back. And we say the book that started it all because it came out right at the beginning of the COVID epidemic, so we couldn't make public appearances, and we did a Facebook thing, and everybody said, oh, you guys are so much fun to listen to. Why don't you do a podcast? So that, hence a podcast was born.
And we're still having fun.
We're still having fun.
You're still
Exactly.
the one. Who am I quoting?
You are,
I know, but I can't think of it. Anyway,
is that the Eagles?
folks, tell us who it is. I don't know if it's the Eagles or not, but there's a little, those of you watching this say,
Doobie
you
Brothers?
know who it is.
I can't.
I
It's
don't
like
remember
I have
who it
like
is.
a brain freeze.
And we
now.
could look it up, but I want
could.
our viewers and listeners to say, oh, we know who that is, and they'll tell us. And we have.
So while we've been doing this podcast, it's been a few years since the COVID, so you've been busy writing other books. So the next book was It's Not About Communication, Why Everything You Know About Couples Therapy is Wrong, and there's a lot of glare on this, so if you're watching it, sorry about that. And then your latest book, Betrayal and Forgiveness, How to Navigate the Turmoil and Learn to Trust Again, which
Yes.
is selling very nicely because a lot of people have been betrayed, unfortunately.
Unfortunately true, and
And some have been the betrayers.
They have?
So there's
Yeah,
stuff in there for the betrayers and the betrayed.
yes, and the thing I hear from folks who have read that book, some of whom have then gone on to become my clients, actually, interestingly enough.
Ah, yes.
But what I've heard is it has helped them feel better. It's helped them,
Yeah.
get a handle on it, even though it's still really difficult when you've been betrayed.
Yep.
And
And I guess you're going to want me to put in a word about
absolutely.
The Blue Tent, Erotic Tales from the Bible by Laria Zilber.
Yes, my
alias.
secret crush, Laria. Oh, you just gave it away. My secret crush, Laria.
Yeah, well.
I've never seen you and Laria in the same room.
Yeah,
What can I tell you? Yes, that is your nom de plume, as you have put it, and beautiful, beautiful book of erotic stories based on biblical characters, and you can get that anywhere books are sold. If you actually, Amazon is really the place to go
Yeah,
for that one.
well.
You need to search for The Blue Tent and the author's name, Laria Zilber. If you just look for blue tents, you will get all sorts of Coleman blue
Yes,
tents.
you want to
That's
have
not what you want.
erotic tales from the Bible afterwards.
Erotic tales from the Bible, that will get you.
Well, enough talking.
Laura's
Let's
book.
get on with Gregory.
Let's get on with it. So we will see you on the other side.
Our guest today is Gregory Diehl. Gregory Diehl is a teacher and mentor for deep thinkers unsatisfied with ordinary approaches to life's most important subjects. His work challenges common cultural narratives, educating and inspiring readers about self-knowledge and confident self-expression. Residing now in a scenic village in Armenia after a lifetime of global cultural experiences, Gregory runs an educational NGO called the Calavan Retreat Center, devoted to uncommon learning, development, and freedom from personal suppression. He is the author of 7 books, the most recent of which is The Romantic Ideal, the highest standard of romance for a man. Gregory, welcome to Couples Therapy in 7 Words.
Hello, thanks for that great introduction.
Well, thank you for doing this. So we always like to start off just asking our guests, how did you get into this? How did you get into the work you do? Tell us something about your own journey.
My professional background is pretty varied, but looking back, it's pretty clear that almost everything I ever did to make money or just even out of passion was in some way related to communication and education. I was always very good somehow at taking complex topics and presenting them in ways people normally wouldn't be able to understand them, but I somehow clarified things for them that suddenly
Wow.
made these profound, deep, difficult things easier for them, which is really useful in a variety of fields, like salesmanship, for instance. If you have a really expensive, really complex value proposition that is not as easy to get across as some things are with a simple marketing campaign, how do you convince people that my product or my service is worth so many thousands of dollars until they understand the finer nuances and details of it and how it's uniquely valuable to them? So that's one example. And once I realized that I could write and sell books, at least moderately successfully, that just opened a lot of doors for me and made me start thinking, well, it takes a really long time to write a book. But if I have the rest of my life, what are all the things I would like to write books about?
Aha.
And now I have more books I'd like to write than I have time to write them. Because even, like you said, this is my seventh book. I have three others I'm concurrently writing now. I have no idea when they'll be done, and many
Mhm.
more I'm already planning for the future.
Mhm.
So there's a bottleneck on production because even as experienced as I am now, I still can't manage to get them done quickly. They just take
Well, it
time, like
takes
good writing
time.
does. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so that's been my main focus now is just I have so many things I want to say. I have so many ways I want to refine my knowledge and my experience, codify it in a way that makes sense for other people. And I would say that's one of the biggest benefits of writing a book that you really pour yourself into and not just, slap together quickly in a week or a month, but edit and refine the hell out of it many, many times over is you feel like you really refined your knowledge on this subject, right? Because that's how much effort it took to write tens of thousands of words about something.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so tell me, what's a hopeless romantic?
A hopeless romantic. I prefer the term romantic idealist, which I use both terms several times throughout
Okay.
the book, but hopeless
I
romantic
want to
is the more
mention, yeah,
common
we
term.
got that from the subtitle of your book,
Yes.
which is usually they've got a title and a subtitle, and you've got a title and a subtitle and a subtitle, which is where you use that term, a hopeless romantics exploration of masculine intimacy, sex, and love. So yeah,
Well,
do expand on
yeah,
that.
I had to get all those important keywords in there, right? So that
Yep.
everybody knows what the book is about. The algorithm knows what to do with it, right?
Uh-huh.
So hopeless romantic is the common term, right? Which basically means that somebody who remains romantic and committed to romantic ideas and aspirations hopelessly, like basically no matter how many times they get their heart broken or are disappointed, they still keep falling head over heels in love. Sometimes we paint such a person in an admirable way, like, wow, it's amazing that they're still romantic at heart even after getting their heart broken so many times. And sometimes we kind of paint them in kind of a pitiable, unfortunate light, like this poor fool, this sucker is just never going to learn that women are always going to break his heart, or if you're a woman, men are always going to use her and break her heart,
Mm.
right? So it can be either a positive or negative connotation to call someone a hopeless romantic. And I prefer the somewhat more formal term romantic idealist, which, of course, the title of the book is The Romantic Ideal, which basically means somebody who holds very high ideals in the romantic domain. There are many, many domains of life where you can be an idealist. Many people are without ever explicitly thinking of themselves in that way in various domains. Basically just means you refuse to settle for less than the best of, of what's possible. It doesn't mean perfection, because in principle, perfection in an imperfect universe is impossible. It doesn't mean you're
Right.
never going to have problems and things are never going to go wrong. It just means the best things can be the
Mhm.
realistic best, right? Which basically means that if you can envision things being better than they are, they're probably not as good as they could be, right?
Mm. Yeah.
So you should be working to make them that good.
Mhm.
And
Uh-huh.
and in the context of your relationship, that means first just knowing what kind of partner would be the ideal for you, and not try to make a square peg fit in a round hole by partnering with just the wrong person for you.
Yep.
And also, of course, even if you are lucky enough to find such a person, which I kind of casually refer to as a soulmate, just someone you have an extraordinarily high level of romantic compatibility with, you
Mhm.
still have to actually make the relationship work. right? It's
Mhm.
not just, oh, we're a good fit for each other. We have really good chemistry. Like, okay, but now you have to be mature adults and communicate and
Yeah.
maintain the relationship for as long as you can. And that even that escapes people too. So
Yeah.
that's all part of the ideal.
And it when you talk about being an idealist, I mean, part of me, because I'm a sucker for a good paradox personally, part of me is thinking, one of the interesting things in a romantic relationship is that the ideal, when I stop and think of the ideal, I'm not sure I would always want it to be whatever I want all the time. It's funny. I
Um,
used to talk about this when I would talk about what kind of synagogue I want to be part of. I want to be part of a synagogue where they do things the way I don't like it sometimes. And I certainly think it's true in the situation of a romantic relationship, especially when you're dealing with heterosexual relationships, although I think this is even true for gay people. But you're looking for someone who isn't a clone of you and therefore is going to present some challenges. And that's what a lot of the generative growth is about. And it's not stuff
yeah.
I would have necessarily known to ask for. So I'm
Isn't
not
that
sure I
kind of the
trust my own
point
ideal.
though?
Yeah,
Right? Like, what would be the
yeah,
point in dating someone exactly the same as you, right?
exactly. That's
You
right.
want
Yeah.
someone
Mhm.
who's different in a complementary way so that you challenge each other, you grow together, and you make each other better through those challenges and that
Exactly.
growth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm. So true. So true. I like the example that you have in the book when you were relating it to the sitcom Friends, the Rachel Ross
Mm,
dynamic and the Monica Chandler dynamic, and why
I'm
the
so glad
Monica
I
Chandler
included that
dynamic,
example.
you
Yeah.
know, because they had that basis of friendship before they had the romantic
Right.
partnership and were able to bring out the best in each other, whereas Rachel and Ross kept making the same mistakes over and over again, and they're going to continue.
Yeah, that always stood out to me. It's so ironic to me that Ross and Rachel are still this thing in pop culture, like this
Right?
idea of this beautiful, amazing, destined for each other kind of romance that like every other sitcom has tried to live up to. And
Hmm.
excluding maybe the first couple of seasons, I haven't watched the show in a long time. I think the first couple of seasons they had a good thing going. Or it was like, okay, yeah, we want to be together, but we don't know if we can be together. And then they kind of make it
Right,
work for a while, and it's sweet and it's beautiful. And he's had a crush on her since high school, and then basically everything after that is complete crap, in my opinion. It's
right.
it's just it's a great example of a terrible, unhealthy, codependent, narcissistic in many ways kind of
Yeah,
relationship,
yeah, yeah,
and this goes on and on for almost 10 seasons, right?
yeah.
And
Well, yeah,
somehow it's still framed as like this beautiful love story. Like, are we watching the same show? What
Yeah, and as you point
what
out,
is
that's
happening?
the finale was about them instead of being about,
Yeah.
Monica and Chandler, where it could have been about, wow, here's your model, folks. Look at
hmm,
how their love grew. And I think you quoted one of the quotes from Chandler. I forgot the exact words, but it's like, I'm the best because you make me the best.
If I'm the best, it's
Yeah.
because you've made me the best.
Yes.
And in that
Yeah.
episode, when he says that quote, he was specifically referring to his sexual performance, I believe,
Aha.
where he found out that Monica said that he was the best she ever had or something, and he was all like cocky about that. I'm so good in bed or whatever, right? Which you wouldn't expect from a guy like Chandler.
Mhm.
And then he kind of humbles himself by the end, realizing, well, maybe my sexual performance has gotten better specifically because it's you I'm doing it
Mm.
with, because of the
right,
amazing chemistry we have, because of how you communicate me, you help me mature. And that's that complementary influence they have on each other. He's kind of this childish, sarcastic, funny guy.
right,
And she's this high-strung, kind of nagging crone of a woman, and they both have strengths and they both have weaknesses, and it's very clear. And they do really naturally complement each other. And within the show, the universe of the show, of course, they were friends for many years, and then they kind of
right,
accidentally realize they're really physically attracted to each other and sleep together with on a drunken vacation, and then they want to keep sleeping together. But then also, I think I don't know where I read this, but somewhere I don't think the writers planned for them to have a romantic
Oh,
relationship.
interesting.
It like Ross and Rachel were clearly
grew in
planned
that
like from the
direction.
beginning that
Yeah,
this is going to be a thing between these two people. And with Chandler and Monica, it just sort of naturally evolved. They saw the
yeah,
natural chemistry between these characters, and I think even the actors commented on that too, that they just agreed, yeah, it makes complete sense for our characters to go down this path. And then suddenly they're married, and they're happy together, and there's still challenges and struggles, but it's very clear that they are always fixing the problems that arise. They are always making each other better. That's what the show should have been about if it was going to have
right,
a romantic focus, not Rachel
right,
getting off the plane to pursue her old
Although I
boyfriend that
think
she.
too many times in real life, too many people are Ross and Rachel, attracted to the wrong person, making the same mistakes over and over, right? Yes?
Yeah.
Is
And
that
I
what
think they
you're
expect
saying? Yeah.
relationships to be kind of heavily dramatized and bombastic, and definitely Ross and Rachel have that. It's heavily
Mm,
dramatized, and it's the kind of thing that sounds good in a movie script.
right.
If you're just focusing on I don't know 2 hours of their dynamic or something. And Monica and Chandler are much more grounded, much more realistic, and in a certain sense, much more boring too.
Well, yeah, I
But
mean, a happily ever after is usually the death knell for a sitcom. I don't, you're too young to remember Rhoda.
who is
Rhoda was
Rhoda?
a
Enlighten
spin-off
me.
of the Mary
Mary
Tyler
Tyler
Moore
Moore show.
show. And
Okay,
he was always looking for love, everybody's looking for love. And she gets her own sitcom. She gets married, and then it became boring.
Yeah.
What do
sure.
you do? So they had to split up.
Yeah. And that's why movies are only 2 hours, because you
Mhm.
Right.
don't have to worry about what happens after the end of the movie.
Exactly.
It's just getting to that point that's interesting to watch.
So, in this spirit of talking about complementariness, whatever the word is, complementarity, I guess that's the word. Tell us about a little small theme here. Tell us about masculinity and femininity. Enlighten us
Yeah,
on that in the next 5 minutes.
sure. This is such a contentious topic to some people nowadays, which really surprised me. Like a lot of people just don't even want to acknowledge that men and women are different, or they think it's kind of nebulous and arbitrary to define what it means to be masculine versus
Mhm.
feminine, and how much of it is natural differences and how much of it is just socially reinforced. And of course, we'll probably never have perfect answers to these questions, but it should be pretty clear that men are quite different than women, both physically and psychologically, right?
Mhm.
We can
Mhm.
nitpick and argue over exactly what the differences are and to what degree they apply, but we're a sexually dimorphic species. Like this is a scientific conclusion, right? This is something we shouldn't need to argue about. The question worth arguing about or discussing is, well, if biologically I'm a male, right? How masculine do I feel, and what do I mean by that?
Mhm.
And if biologically, if you're a woman, how feminine do you feel? And exactly again, what do we mean by that? Does that mean that you should spend all day in the kitchen and taking care of kids? Is that what being feminine means? Does it possibly
Apparently
encompass
not.
those things? Or right? Or same thing with men. Does it mean that I focus on a high-powered career or go to sports games with my buddies or drink beer on weekends? Or like what is that
Apparently
what it
not.
means to be masculine, right?
Yeah.
And no, it's clearly just certain types of personality traits that are overrepresented in men and women respectively, and it's certainly not absolute and binary. You can be a woman with more masculine traits in some domains and a man with more feminine traits in some domains. And I even say in the book, like that's actually quite a good thing sometimes, and it can be quite attractive to the opposite gender.
Mhm.
If you're a
Mhm.
masculine man who can embody certain feminine traits when it is advantageous to, or vice versa, if you are a feminine woman who can show her masculine side when it's useful, that's really attractive because it shows this person isn't locked into just one narrow way of being. They're flexible, they're adaptable, they can be a lot more than just what they happen to be best at. It's not that, well, if I'm a masculine man, I don't need my feminine partner to act masculine most of the time because generally I'm going to do a better job of that, right? And vice versa. Generally, she's going to do a better job at being feminine than I am, but still, it's good if I can be that person sometimes when
Mhm.
it's necessary, right? And so, really, romantic polarity, that tension, we're always attracted to not someone who's the same as us, right? But someone who's the complementary opposite, right? So, whatever that is for you, however you identify yourself. Um, I think you could be really good best friends with someone who's the same as you,
Mhm.
but are you going to have that raw driving sexual and romantic and loving passion for someone that you want to make your soulmate and your partner for the rest of your life?
Personally, I would annoy the
It's
hell out of myself, but even as a friend, I don't know if I could be my own best friend, but I get your point. Yes, I certainly couldn't be my
right.
own romantic partner. Yeah.
And of course, I write the book bringing my own biases quite transparently into the book, and I never try to hide that, right? I'm not writing it all from an objective and scientific perspective. I'm saying, well,
Mhm.
here are a lot of experiences I've had. Here's a lot of interesting examples from modern and ancient mythology. Here's a little bit about what we know scientifically and psychologically. Uh, what does this mean for you in your life, right? uh, and I never at all try to say like everyone should have my values and view relationships the way I do, right?
Mhm.
Like for example, I am very interested in romantic monogamy, and that has always been a strong value of mine. One I have failed at so far throughout my life, which is part of why I have so many interesting experiences to write about the book. But that also doesn't exclude alternatives. Like I've also had really rewarding casual relationships, casual sex, people who I never saw myself getting married to, but still we learned a lot from each other and were very positive influences on each other. So it's not like one or the other. It's not like, well, if I want to be married to my soulmate someday, I have to deny any other kind of possible relationship I might ever enter. I'd say as long as no one is getting hurt or misled in any way, do whatever is good for both of you, whatever helps you learn, whatever helps you grow intellectually, emotionally, physically, whatever. And that's probably, I'm hoping, that's how you become the kind of person who is ultimately capable of having what you consider to be your ideal relationship and sustain it.
I noted in your one of the things you did in your book, which I thought was really interesting, is you had a woman therapist, I guess what colleague of yours? I mean, she's not a romantic partner of yours, as far as I could tell. Although I don't know actually, you can answer that or not. But she's certainly somebody that you've worked with and consulted with, and has a lot to say about. She provided a feminine forward to your very masculine
Yes.
book. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, that was quite by design.
Mhm.
Often forwards to books are kind of just like optional introductions written by some outside party that provides some kind of interesting context or perspective. But I really do feel like this isn't a forward you should skip. I think it's an
Right.
essential part
Oh, for
of the
sure.
book, providing that complementary perspective and opposite, partially validating what I'm saying, although I think even she would admit she doesn't agree 100% with everything I say,
Mhm.
but still she understands and appreciates where I'm coming from. And you can tell just in the differences in our writing styles and the things we say, she's coming from a different perspective. She has a different way of verbalizing her ideas. Her name is Svetlana Sevak. She's a psychotherapist in Toronto, and she was a big part of my refining of the book. She kind of fell into a position where she really did a lot to help me edit the content of the book and to clarify some things, particularly when I was talking about what it's like to be a woman or trying
Mhm.
to explain things in a way that I would hope women would understand about men. She did a lot to kind of be that reflecting voice saying, well, yeah, Gregory, that makes sense, but I don't know what you're talking about here. Or no, Gregory, that's not at all what it's like. What are you talking about? Right. And so that really was essential for me to try to, as best as humanly possible, explain these really difficult, nuanced dynamics. So
Mhm.
her voice adding to her own feminine perspective at the beginning of this, I think really does help balance out the book and show that it's not just a man's view of the world. This is the way men are, like this is what
Mhm.
men want, ladies, listen up. But rather just here's how things are for me from my very biased and skewed perspective is what I identify as a highly masculine and highly sexual and highly romantic man. And I'm aware of the limitations I have. And in spite of that, I've done my best to try to understand the feminine perspective that is so elusive, so alien, yet so captivating to me. Right. And that's the best we can do in the same way that a highly feminine woman should really try to understand what life is like from the perspective of a highly masculine man. And I feel like, unfortunately, not enough women do that. Both sides kind of still have this weird default perspective that, well, there's something wrong with the opposite gender for not being more like us.
Mhm.
Like
So what do you think
men
the
should be more
greatest
like women and women should be more like men.
Mhm.
so what's the greatest misconception that you have found in relationships on both parts, men seeing women and women seeing men?
Well, certainly that.
Mhm.
Rather than appreciating the differences, it's
Mhm.
like everyone should be more like me, obviously.
Mhm.
I talk about Professor Henry Higgins a few times. Why
Why
can't
can't
a
a
woman
woman
be
be more
more
like
like
a
a
man?
man?
Right. Yeah.
Right? Which is an absurd thing because if women were more like men, most of the time we probably wouldn't be very attracted to them.
Mhm.
Um, he does have something of a point, which is what I was saying before, that it's good to be able to embody some of the opposite gender traits when it's appropriate, but you wouldn't want them to be that way all the time. If I acted like a woman all the time, even if I have certain feminine, virtuous character traits, like I'm really good with children, I'm very caretaking and nurturing in certain contexts, and every woman I've ever known has said that's highly attractive about me. But if I were like a woman in every domain of my life, they wouldn't see me as a sexual or romantic
Yeah.
partner. They'd see
Right.
me as a girlfriend,
Yep.
probably, right? And that's fine if that's what you want in your life, but there wouldn't be that romantic polarity. And same thing, tomboys are can be very attractive if they're women who have like certain masculine traits, but if they're just like men all the time, then we just see them as men, right?
Yeah.
And so we need to step away from that thing where we assume that because something is different than us, it's bad. And rather,
Yeah.
we should acknowledge, okay, we are limited on our own, they are limited on their own, but somehow if we come together in just the right way, we do things that neither of us is capable of. So and really in both sides, like several times throughout the book, I say that historically and still currently in many ways, men have treated women like undeveloped men, like children essentially, which is why we've had struggles for women's rights and the kind of infantile way that men treat women. Women have in many places have learned to embrace this and accept, oh, it's a man's job to take care of me, like I'm a precious little baby who can't take care of herself, right?
Yeah.
And it just perpetuates this horrible cycle. And same thing, women treat men like brutish cavemen who are
Mhm.
totally emotionally undeveloped and stunted, but hey, we can lift heavy things and make money, so I guess we're useful for that at the very least, right?
Well,
And
British cavemen
it's
or adolescents,
yeah,
and often those things reinforce each other. Because and what I hear from women, I'm of us, I'm the couples therapist. Judy's the real person, as I often point out. Judy's a retired educator. But what I often will hear from women is, I don't want to. We already have kids. I don't want to have another kid. But he's so clueless, and she's not attracted to him because she generally doesn't want to have sex with the kids, which is
yeah.
really a good thing that she doesn't. But that's the problem. And then he keeps saying, well, why is she acting like my mother? And they end up in this sort of adolescent parent sort of thing going, and it's really uncomfortable for both.
I know men who cannot cook themselves a meal.
Mm,
Like
yeah,
Hmm.
not just that they don't like to, they don't prefer to, they're not very good at it, but they can't. Like they will
yeah.
if there's not just food they can eat right in front of them, they don't know what to do. And
Mhm.
it's fine not to want to spend a lot of time cooking, not to be particularly skilled at it or um but like yeah, obviously, if one person is much more skilled in the kitchen and enjoys cooking more, it's in everybody's benefit if that person does the majority of the cooking, right? Same thing with every other
Well,
domestic task you could think of, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be women. There can be men who are much better
right.
skilled at
Oh,
that,
I
right?
know plenty where
Our
it's the men.
son.
Yeah,
Yes, our
sure.
son does most of the cooking, and he's married to a woman. Yeah.
Basic division of labor concept, right? Whoever's better suited to
Mhm.
do a task should
Right.
probably do more of it. But like the fact that you become completely dependent and not able to feed yourself, like this
Mhm.
basic survival task, like that's quite infantile. Or and to reverse it, the same thing with women who like I've dated girls who like they if we were packing for a trip or something with their carry-on bag that couldn't have been more than 20 pounds maybe, they'd say, "Oh, can you take my suitcase down the stairs for me, my 20-pound carry-on bag?" And I say, yeah, of course, I don't mind doing that for you. But like, are you asking me just because it's easier for me and it's more convenient for me? Or can you literally not lift your own carry-on suitcase? Like, is that so big a strain, like that you will die from exhaustion or pull a muscle? Like, I'm genuinely curious. Like, because if you literally cannot lift your own carry-on bag, doesn't that seem like a crippling weakness to you? And then they tend to get very offended when I start having conversations like that.
For some strange reason.
Right. And I'm not saying it to be offensive, like you're a weak little baby. I'm just saying, like, what is it like for you? Like, how are you assessing this? Does that not feel quite debilitating to you? In the same way that I've asked men that you can't make yourself a goddamn sandwich to feed yourself. Like, don't you feel like an infant to be
Exactly.
Yeah.
in such a position, right?
That's why I travel light.
But you are totally capable of managing your own carry-on, as you often do.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, indeed. So this is a question out of left field, but it may actually relate and sort of relates to what you do. How'd you end up in Armenia?
Yeah, well, that's a hell of a story. I'd spent a long time traveling around the world, more than 10 years to about 50 countries throughout my 20s. And that is a huge part of how I've had such interesting experiences in romance and other places too, because it's like seeing various cultures in different states of development and evolution. many of the things that in the West we've assumed that humanity has grown out of, particularly in regard to like how we used to treat women in America, for instance, are still very much in full force in many other parts of the world, or even worse. Like I'm on the border with Iran, where women still have to wear hijabs or they could get stoned to death. And I've
Mm.
had many exiles, Iranian men and women from Iran, cross the border into Armenia and come stay at my house. We have a guest in a volunteer program here, so I've gotten to know a lot of Iranians who were escaping truly horrendous human rights conditions. And yeah, and they seem like great people, very open-minded, very creative, very eager to be free. And they come from this horrible place that feels like it's stuck in the dark ages, right?
Yeah.
Armenia is a bit better than that, but still like the majority of young women I know do not feel that they are free to choose their own husband here, like that their
Wow.
parents should do that for them. Or
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
like if you're not married and pregnant by the time you're 25, you're basically useless as a woman. Like you're past your expiration date here. Like just
Mm-hmm.
just throw the woman away and start over, right? Like
Mm.
that's how they view it. It's insane. But and in many other ways, you know, they're very modern, very intellectual, creative people, and they still hold these really strange, outdated cultural traditions that just kind of boggles your mind as a Westerner.
Mm. So there, how did you get there?
Oh, well,
Yeah.
I decided to retire in a village. My grandmother was Armenian, so I have some family ancestry here. And I
Ah,
bought
Uh-huh.
an old house in a village called Calavan and slowly refurbished it into what I'm now calling a retreat center for lifestyle and education advancement in
Yeah.
a place where we're trying to represent certain types of values and educational resources that are quite rare here, including the kinds of things we're talking about now, like letting the people here know that it's okay to think a different way and to live beyond the restrictions that your culture enforces on you.
so this is a retreat center for adults, not for children, correct?
No, no. Well, many of the neighboring children have come here to learn things like English and music and various arts we've
Ah,
provided here, but in general, no, it's for international travelers, and local Armenians have come and stayed for weeks or months at a time. Um, it is an opportunity for freedom from personal suppression is how you put it in my introduction. Because again, a lot of these people really are escaping oppression and suppression by legal forces or just cultural forces that try to force them to live a certain way. And that's the kind of thing we take for granted in the good old USA, where freedom is our whole deal. It's our brand
hmm.
identity as
Mhm.
Americans,
Right,
freedom, right?
right.
Whether or not we perfectly embody that, which obviously we don't, right? But still, the idea is highly supported still throughout the country, and traveling around the world, you realize how rare that really is.
Mm.
Like,
Oh,
Yeah.
why do we
yeah.
make such a big deal about being free? Well, because most places aren't free.
Mm.
Hmm.
So do you offer like particular programs for folks, or is it more free form than that, or what, like what sort of things do you offer?
Until now, it's been quite freeform. We've had a volunteer program active for about a year. We've had probably close to 100 people from 20 or 30 different countries come and stay here and help refurbish the house or develop art programs or paint the walls or build an extension behind the house. So we're still very much in the development phase. And now that things have gotten pretty comfortable here physically, we're getting pretty well known around the country. There was just a documentary posted on local TV about us. Like a
Oh.
camera crew came to the house and wanted to know what's this crazy American doing here. It turned out pretty well. And yeah, really, we're trying to challenge the status quo. Near the end of the book, I talk about how this has personally affected my romantic life when the only girl I have ever asked to marry me couldn't be with me because her parents didn't approve of me.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
I refer to that as the romantic culture war. Why? Because romance, romantic inclination, following the desires of our heart, causes us often to go to war with what our families and our cultures and our traditions expect of us. You see
Mhm.
this all the time in many classic romantic stories
Oh,
where,
sure.
yeah, some romantic poet falls in love with some princess who's in a very limited, restrained position in life, and she can't she can't go against what her society demands of her, what her parents demand of her, but she also can't ignore that she's so attracted to this handsome, roguish
Mhm.
young man who's stumbled into her life. And the
Hmm.
whole movie is about her developing the confidence and the wherewithal to say yes to that and say, I'm gonna, whatever it takes, whatever risks I have to make, I'm going to make this work because love is more important than anything else, which I interpret as an aspect of full self-expression. Being the person I'm supposed to be and doing what matters to me, pursuing my values is more important than maintaining cultural status quo, keeping
Mm.
everyone else comfortable and happy. That's what romance is all about, breaking the rules because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. Our son just recently, he's a writer among other things. I mean, he does lots of things, but he recently wrote a piece where, in effect, what he's talking about, it's a sort of a fanciful, um, it's a letter from a somebody who is sitting at a table in the scene in Rent, where they're singing La Vie Bohème.
Hmm.
And I don't know if you're familiar with the musical Rent.
Vaguely, yeah.
Yeah, so they're just celebrating rebellion. And
Yeah.
so, and the guy who
The
writes this
Bohemian
letter,
Revolution, love you one.
yeah, exactly, Bohemian Revolution, and the guy who's writing the letter is a more or less a representative of the class against which they are rebelling. And what he
Hmm.
points out is, you do realize, you rebels, that you only exist because of us who are not rebelling. In other words, we need each other, or you certainly need us, is the point. In other words, there's no rebellion except against something that is fixed. And if there were nothing fixed, the rebellion wouldn't exist. They wouldn't have that energy. And there's something creative about the polarity there, speaking of polarities.
Sure. It's
Yeah.
it's a balance between order and chaos. And
Yeah.
Mhm.
traditionally it's the masculine side that represents order and the feminine side that
Mhm.
represents chaos, right?
Yeah.
And isn't that what we're so attracted to about women?
Hmm.
That they aren't like us, that they represent this amazing, flowing, exploding energy that we just want to dive into. Isn't that what sex is? It's chaotic, it's beautiful,
Hmm.
it's free form, it's
Mhm.
passionate, right?
Yes.
And
Right.
that's what masculine men are so bad at and limited in on their own, right? That's why
Hmm.
we need women in our lives to bring us into that beautiful, flowing, chaotic space that we don't really get to on our own very easily.
Yeah. The terms I like to use in my books are stability and intimacy, which again, you can, yeah, indeed, can tie masculine and feminine, though they don't map perfectly, of course. But that notion that relationships need both, and when the balance gets out of whack, it becomes destabilizing. If there isn't enough intimacy, that becomes destabilizing. If there's too much chaos, they can't be intimate. Or sometimes all they have is intimacy and there's no stability, and that becomes, that
Yes,
doesn't
so
last.
so you find
Yeah.
that balance together, and if you're both bringing your strengths, your specializations into the relationship, that's how you make that work. There's always
Yeah.
this push and pull, but ultimately there's a balance and mutual respect from each side.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So how can people get in touch with you, and like how should people find you if they want to find you?
Well, the book is on Amazon and other online retailers. It's called The Romantic Ideal. If you want to learn more about me or get in touch with me, you can go to my website, which is gregorydiehl.net. Deal is spelled Diehl.
And we'll put
I
that in the session notes or the episode notes for
Yeah.
that.
My other books are not about romance and love per se, but they are all about various aspects of radical self-expression, self-knowledge, learning to embody your values in a world that does not always make it easy. So if you like what I have to say about romantic relationships, you might like what I have to say about some other topics too.
Oh, okay.
Great. Well, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, this was fun.
Well, great.
Welcome back. We hope you enjoyed that interview with Gregory Diehl. And if you're in Armenia, check out that Calavan Retreat Center.
And even if you're not in Armenia, you can check out his information. We'll have that
Yes,
in
and certainly
the
check
notes.
out his books. And the recent one that we've been talking about, The Romantic Ideal, the highest standard of romance for a man.
So I think that's all we need to say, is it not?
I think
think
so.
so. And so until next time,
Remember, be kind
don't panic.
and have faith.